Oh, hello. Nice to see you back. And welcome to Down the Donut Hole podcast from the field, so to speak, and nature. And we're going to be talking about stuff like that today. What happens to you when you don't have a specific schedule and you're surrounded by very peaceful sort of surroundings, birds chirping and sort of thing like that. And, you become reflective, and that's a good thing, right?
It's a good thing, but it can be really scary. Because
it's so different, yeah.
You meet yourself, your true self. And if it's daytime, there's a thing that happens to you in the night, I think, when that voice in everybody's head is clamoring around, oh, you should have said this in this situation, or, gee, you should do this differently, or, oh, you're planning. I do a lot of meal planning in the early morning hours. I'm not sure why that's the case. I try to take a little mental inventory of what I have in the cupboard and what I should fix for supper, or do I need to go out to the store, all of that sort of thing. When I was working full-time jobs, I always had wardrobe planning that if I didn't do it the night before and choose something that I was just going to slide myself into before I ran out the door, then that was in the list of things that I fretted over in the early morning, usually before daylight. And when you are in a very quiet place, now here you listen to the bees humming, the birds singing, and a wind that comes off the back mountain all day long. And sometimes it's gusty, other times it's just a quiet breeze.
Yeah.
But
you can't predict it. I mean, you go where it's just perfect, and then all of a sudden you're like gasping for air.
Or your things are blowing your way.
Yeah,
that's it. And that sounds idyllic. But I will say that if you allow yourself in daylight hours, and there's a difference now, in daylight hours, you allow yourself to get quiet, really quiet. And for a few minutes at least, just take in those environmental sounds, push away all the clamor in your head, all the planning like I've just described, all of that other stuff. You push that to the side kindly. You don't berate yourself for having, all of these discordant thoughts, coming into the forefront of your consciousness. You just think, okay, I'll deal with that later, or not right now. I'm going to focus on the sounds that are immediately around me. And that's the beginning of the process of meditative thinking.
Exactly. You get to close your eyes. That's one of the things they actually teach in some of the courses, to close your eyes and see how many things you can really detect in your environment just with your ears.
It's magnificent. It's a magnificent exercise, because you will find that oral environment is so much richer than what you perceive peripherally. Like right now, I don't know if you can hear in the background, faintly, an airplane overhead.
Let's go quiet for a second.
Okay.
Definitely.
There it is. So that's there. Normally, I would talk over that. I talk over most stuff, as you know.
Yeah, tell me about it.
But I'm being aware. Now, we are conducting this podcast inside today because the wind has been really gusty, and that gets to be intrusive. It sort of takes over, and you wind up really trying to speak over the wind. So we're not going to do that. But I think what we should do, Dave, with your permission, because you'll have to handle it technically, can we tack on some honest-to-goodness, actual sound of what it would be like if our listeners were here with us, sitting quietly with their feet up on a low stone wall like we like to do?
Yeah, no problem at all. It's we've done some similar things actually when we were doing some of the on the road ones, but we've got the actual environment we're in right now. Sure, yeah, no problem. We can tack that on at the end.
Yeah, and then you can go out. It'll also be part of the podcast that you can replay if you find it relaxing or interesting or even if you just need it for a snippet of natural sound for some project you're working on, go for it. Because that makes a big difference sometimes. If you can introduce actual sound. We used to, for some of our projects, we used to try to do narration with natural sound in the background. But describe what you encountered, Dave, when we brought that stuff back to the studio and you were trying to work with that.
Oh, I'm not sure which thing you're referring to. But
I'm talking the things that
not embarrassing, right? I mean,
no, on the way up to the tower.
Oh, ghosts?
No.
Yeah, that was very loud. If you really listen closely, you realize that there is quite a bit going on. It's not on the surface. If you're not paying complete attention to it, right? It seems like it's not a lot, but when you really focus on it, all of a sudden you hear more and more, and you realize, wow, it's really busy.
Yeah, and this was a country road, climbing up a hill, and we were taping, I forget what it was, but it turned out, a babbling brook. It was in the spring, so it was really lively. A babbling brook, lots of wind, insects, loud birds calling to each other. I think it was probably mating season or something. And the vocal part of the project we were working on was completely buried by the background sounds, because we didn't tape them
it was
separately.
Very loud, yeah. It really was.
When you hear it and it's modulated in an effective way that you can keep track of the spoken word in a project or something like that, that's because it's been recorded on two separate tracks, the background track and the spoken track. And that makes a much nicer finished product, unless you just make it clear, okay, this is where we are. Sometimes it always makes me think about the newscasters, the weathercasters. Well, you see them on TV, and let's say there's a hurricane situation and they're outside and the wind is lashing their coat and stinging their face and they're having to shout to be heard. And of course, that's an extreme example of what we're talking about, but you very much get the sense that Mother Nature is doing her thing and she doesn't care what the TV news requires or cable news. She's not in on that team. She's just out there. And to a much smaller degree, even in a place like this, which is very quiet, we think, until you try something like that. And then you hear distant passing cars, distant dogs barking. I hear from here bells, like cow bells. I think they're actually on sheep, because sometimes I hear what sounds like sheep bleating across the valley.
Yeah, I've heard that, yeah.
It's a long way, though, isn't it? It's not right on top of it.
It is, I think where we're located, sort of on with a mountain behind us, we're kind of gathering those sounds from the whole valley.
Yeah, I would expect so. We used to hear the horses. I haven't heard them, but I bought a whole bunch of carrots. I'm going to walk down there maybe tonight.
They're not really known for being all that loud.
No, but occasionally you hear them. Or did. I did last time we were here, and I haven't so much this time.
Maybe you weren't paying enough attention.
To what? You mean since I've been here?
Yeah, to get all the sounds, yeah. It does take some time sometimes.
It could be. I've been indoors more this time because mostly I was really cold, and the wind made me cold. I'm feeling better, and so, I can spend more time outside, and I did today. My favorite thing is to go out there early in the morning and sit with a nice cup of coffee. That is one of the true pleasures, I think, of being in a natural place like this. And, you just sit. I like to watch the sun come up over the mountain, and I love to see the reflection of that sun in the water that's down below that I can see. And it is very, very bucolic. So,
yeah, that's the right word for it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes. We taped one time. We did some taping in 3D. Do you remember the sound of that bee?
Yeah. Sounded like it was going right behind your head, which it was, actually. That's what happened.
It did happen. But the thing is I was sitting on the couch many months later in our house. I forgot about that, and we were listening to some of that footage and some of that recording, I guess is a better way to put it. And it sounded like there was a bee right behind me. And I literally flinched. I mean, I had to look and make sure that at any minute it was going to land on me or sting me or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think we played that for Des, remember? And he too had the same reaction, that he had to physically turn around and make sure it wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very cool effect. But it can be disarming at first.
Yeah, it can. I remember that one time we were here, actually, and you were trying to tape an impending thunderstorm. And boy, that was a disappointment, wasn't it? Because you could see lightning, light up the sky on the horizon, but there was no rolling thunder. It was just like heat lightning.
Yeah, there was no sound, but it was a great shot for the video, though.
Oh, it was, because it was dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I think, in July sometime, one time when we were here.
Likely.
So, when you are alone with your thoughts, I think it's important to learn to discipline yourself, to try to stay as positive as you can. Because if you relive a lot of things that are troubling to you and leave it at that, you don't try to discern what was the lesson from that experience, and then come away with something positive from a negative experience, or an experience that you would label on first pass as negative. If you understand that all your life experience contributes to a pool of wisdom that you can draw from, frankly, just experience. If you're giving advice to a young person, and you can say in total honesty and a certain degree of vulnerability, oh yeah, I remember this experience that I had when I wasn't much older than you, and this is how I handled it, which I realized afterwards was not the best way to handle it. And this is how I wish I had handled it, or how I should have handled it. And then you take it apart so that you get those golden kernels from your life experience. And if you do that often enough, and you go through that exercise, which can be frightening and painful to a high degree, because you have to own your decision-making, in the sense that you made choices, certain choices, they were yours to make. But I think you have to, as you review those life experiences, to mine those kernels of wisdom, you have to remember your station in life when that happened. Were you a full adult? Or did you experience that with very much a childish or immature sensibility? And when you add that element, that milieu, or that resume, if you want to call it that, I think you can maybe, for want of a better word, forgive yourself for a mistake or for handling things really badly. Maybe you completely goofed it up. But if you understand the factors that were influences in who you were at that point in time, because the object of life is to grow, not just grow old and white-haired and wrinkly and all of that, but to advance your sensibility in how you look at the world. And if you can take into consideration the person you were at that particular point in your timeline, and be kind to that person, and understand that not every experiment is going to come out with a yes a go for it result. A lot of them that are as valid, maybe even more valid, come up with the sense that, no, I should not have done that. I didn't have enough information. I didn't have enough maturity. I didn't have enough physical resource to be able to make that turn out in a favorable way. So when you add all of those qualifiers to all of these experiences, these little life experiments that you've conducted as you've grown, as you've advanced through your timeline, I think it helps. And it certainly makes your perspective a lot more informed, i.e., more valuable, especially if you can call that up when it's needed or correlate your life experience to something you see another person is struggling with, especially young ones. If you can put yourself in that mindset a little bit and, in a way, humble yourself to own the situations that you have not done the greatest job handling. Maybe you did the best you could in the moment, but in retrospect, you may be feeling a lot of guilt or wishful thinking that you had been able to handle that differently.
What's the difference between that sort of approach and the pure meditative, where I think the idea is to just completely open yourself up and stop the monkey mind and see what comes to you rather than have a self-analysis thing going on?
I think the magic is in both. I think there's times for both. I think if you can quiet your spirit completely by pushing all of that, what you call the monkey voice or the monkey mind, and by that I mean just that constant dialogue that's going on in your head. You should have done this, you should have done that. What about this? What about that? It's just this constant thing. And I think that's kind of necessary to keep people motivated, and to keep you contributing to your own survival if that voice is there. But you don't want to give it too much credence. And so if you can quiet it by, like we described earlier, pushing it off to the side and saying, I'll deal with this later. Right now, all I want to do is get really quiet and listen to the wind and the bees.
That was my point, I think, yeah. And that would be the wrong setting, I think, at least it is for me, to try to self-analyze, psychoanalyze myself, as it were. Instead, just be out there to receive something from your environment, completely open. And I think that's a lot of the monks and that type of
cloistered situations.
Well, maybe not even that, but there were in fact, around here, something we have not endeavored to find yet, but we probably should. I think that's on the other ridge that we see from the valley. There was a local monk, I don't remember his name, if you remember that story or not, but there you can apparently go up there and find out where it was that he had set something up for him to just meditate up there. And, so that obviously is not behind some sort of stone wall somewhere in a cloister, but you're out and really exposing yourself to the environment and see what comes to you.
I would agree with you in short-term situations. I think if you can find a really quiet place to sit, then you have to do exactly what Dave is describing. Just get yourself quiet and feel. Be totally present in the moment. Forget all the other stuff that's gone before. All your decision-making, all your past experience, all your mistakes, and also what you plan for the future. Leave all of that off to the periphery and focus on exactly the moment. And you will be absolutely enchanted by the elegance of the present. It's rare that we allow ourselves to fully encounter what is right now in this very instant in our lives. And if you allow yourself to perceive the richness of the present, then it will bring to you an absolutely great sense of peace. And you will feel a gratitude because maybe for the first time ever, you will understand how interconnected it all is, how you are connected, and how all of these factors exist right around you, but you don't pay them full attention, hardly at all. And so in those short bursts where you encounter the fullness, the richness of this moment in isolation, I think it's very helpful, healthful, healing to just go with that. But I think if you find yourself in a solitary situation for a long time, I believe it's unavoidable to review some of the things in your life that, critically, really, but in also short bursts, where you look at it, you mine it, what did I learn from that? And I think if you can even force yourself, make yourself, discipline yourself to say, what do I now know that I didn't know at the time when I was dealing with whatever it is? What do I know now that I didn't know then? Who am I now that I wasn't then or wasn't capable of being then? Or what other factors played into my decision-making at that time that are now gone, for better or for worse? And when you take a thing apart in that way and you place it in the context of the moment or the period of time that you were dealing with, when you can stand back and look at that more objectively and you decide, what did you learn from that? What are the good takeaways? What are the positives that came out of that? It could be a whole horrible mess. But if you learned how not to continue creating or participating in horrible messes, then you have found gold in the midst of all the pile of muck. And so those two things, quieting yourself completely for periods of time, immersing yourself totally in the present. And that includes taking a survey of how does your body feel in this moment? How does it feel? The connection point between you and whatever you're sitting on. The underside of your legs, your derriere. Start at your rump and say, okay, I'm sitting on this.
I'd find that spot that feels right to you. I was sort of on one of my rambles when you were out sick. What I was trying to say is that your orientation, even your proximity to other solid objects around you in your environment,
absolutely,
makes a difference. Like the analogy I gave about a magnet. If you have two poles together that are not aligned properly, let's put it that way, there's a lot of force resistance against that, against you making connection. And when you turn them around the other way, they slam together with a lot of force, and that's you making a connection somewhere.
Yeah.
So, and I was, I brought up the term feng shui, which I don't know much about. You probably know more about that than I do.
I don't know too much.
But that's the general idea behind that, and it makes sense in science. If you are oriented, you're connected better, then you are going to have some more of these revelations maybe, or even just feeling energized by the connection that you're making.
Well, I think that's part of it. If you perceive that you are carrying stress across your shoulders, or maybe across your eyes and through your forehead, and if you can allow yourself to get quiet and deliberately, thoughtfully, purposefully release those tensions, maybe you need to stretch your neck muscles. One of the things that I do sometimes when I perceive that I'm really stressed up is try to look behind myself, keep my body steady, but move my head as if I were looking, as if I were trying to see like to the center of my spine. I do it first on the left side, then I do it on the right side. And I repeat that stretch a few times and then bring my focus back to center and just that little bit of stress reduction helps me to feel better almost instantly. And those guided meditations help people to connect, completely with where their body is at this moment in space and time, deliberately. If your feet are flat on the floor, feel that. Feel the resistance that the floor is as it meets the sole of your foot.
Yeah, focus on and sort of having the wider experience. And there is some research along the lines of using some psychotic drugs to achieve this perspective that you're after, which who am I? Who cares what I say? But I think that's the wrong approach, because if you really get into meditation the right way and you really practice it, you can achieve that without the drugs. And
I think the drug becomes a crutch.
It can. I think
there
that's
are
the danger, definitely.
Cultural factors where psychotics have been used as part of ritual, but that's the difference, is they are part of a very strict ritual. And if they're just generally available and you're picking them up on the street corner or something like that, you're divorced from those.
They're controlled trials, is what I'm speaking about. And there's certain universities that are doing that. And really what they're after, like I said, is that even that one profound experience of perspective, that, you zoom out, and you zoom out of the planet even. You're looking at the planet from somewhere else. And once you get that perspective, it does tend to change people. But I don't think it's a safe way, just me personally, that to achieve that. And just keep trying the meditative path.
I think I agree. And I would say that a lot of the psychotic drugs, again, they're part of cultural rituals. And presumably the people that are going to be partaking of that or going to be invested in those rituals, those people live in proximity where that's part of their understanding, their worldview. And I think that the community collective in those communities, those cultural centers, I think they would not let an individual abuse that experience. And so I think that there's guardrails and watchtowers, and there's a certain sense of behavioral acceptance for certain decisions, and you're just not going to be invited to or have access to those powerful kinds of, I'll call them medicines, because it is applied medicinally or religiously. So within those contexts, I think it's fine. But I think even clinically, unless that person remains within a circle of concern where they can be watched and, there can be certain assurances that they're not taking the wrong concepts from those experiences.
Yeah. It does include counseling after they've had the experience, and they are watched closely, and they're hooked up to, look at your blood pressure and your pulse and all that kind of thing.
Well, during the event, yeah. But, I think people have gotten a little bit too hooked on that which is recreational and that which is entertainment. If you watch movies, and this may seem like a weak correlation, but for me, it's meaningful. People are looking for more and bigger thrills. And so I would say that because of that cultural, what's a good word? That cultural predisposition to seek that which is bigger and better and greater and wilder and cooler and all of that, I think that people are particularly in danger of taking the wrong thing away from that experience, saying, wow, that was cool. I can't wait to do it again.
So
or I can't wait to do
thing.
Yeah, where the head rush becomes the purpose of it, rather than seeking some deeper, more profound understanding of interconnections which would be characteristic of a religious, ritualistic, culturally bounded usage of those same drugs. I mean, you can hook people up all you want, and you can tell that, hey, wow, they're getting off on this. But in the aftermath, I think it's difficult to be certain that this person, that the takeaway for them was a profound understanding of a certain cosmic truth rather than just
really
than just a head rush. So I don't know. I might be way off base, but that's my concern about it.
Perspective is indeed everything, in my opinion. And understanding that we have just a small slice of reality that we can even see. And, fully understanding that into your spirit, so to speak, is changing. There's no question about it.
When you are faced with serious problems, and I'm using the word problems instead of challenges, because most of the time, I think there's pressure to choose the word challenge rather than problem. But you know what? Let's set down the BS and let's call problems problems. Sometimes a lot of crap happens all at once that a person has to deal with, and they have to go through that. There's nobody else to take it over. They might be able to seek help from somebody who's nearby, who knows something about a situation, but there's just a lot of stuff each person has to kind of manage on their own. And I do think, for me personally, one of the tricks that I use is to try to, get through it as quickly as possible and do as good a job as I can to deal with the factors, whatever the contributing factors are to my big problem, to deal with those in such a way that it's unlikely I'm going to be dealing with this same mess again. I always say it's like gum on your shoe. You've got to deal with the gum on your shoe. You've got to. And the better job you do getting it off the bottom of your shoe, the less likely you're going to be, sticking to the pavement, or that you're going to be spreading it around to your carpet or, the interior of your car. It's exactly that way. So deal with it as thoroughly, as competently, as purposefully, and as proactively as you possibly can to minimize the fact that you're going to be doing it again. Same thing with cleaning up puke. Get it over with. Get it over with as fast as you can.
Why did you bring up that example exactly?
Well, because it's a great metaphor, I think, for a lot of the problems. It's nothing anybody enjoys doing. You can learn tricks, dump sand on, ugly problems like that, sweep it up, use a mop or a scrubbing brush or certain detergents or something to clean it up. I use it because it's a great metaphor. Everybody has had the experience of something like that. We can all agree it's an unpleasant experience.
Probably not something to call up in your meditative endeavors.
No, but if you're talking about problem solving with things that come up that you got to deal with that you don't want to, and you can correlate it to, okay, I don't want this. This is a real pain. All right, I'm just going to devote myself to getting this over with the best that I can and making myself do an extra good job so that there are fewer residuals left over from my efforts. Now, that's not always true with complex problems, because cleaning up messes like gum and other things like that, those are pretty straightforward. You know if you did a good job, and you'll know if you didn't. But those are good metaphors for stuff we don't want to have to handle, and you just gotta. The trade-off is, sometimes your job depends on it. Sometimes your family is counting on you. Sometimes it's just for yourself. And what you're trying to do is create the best living situation that you can. And you are, you're very motivated. Sometimes it feels like, oh God, if this is just one more problem, all I have is problems. That's when you need to take a break. Then you need to sit down, get quiet, do your meditation and understand that you are not completely surrounded by problems. And if you get quiet enough and you look at little things, rather than looking for some big trumpet out of the sky that's going to say, wow, look at all this great stuff that's around you. That happens so rarely that there's some big, significant, wondrous achievement or, blessing bestowed in your life that is world-changing. Yeah, it happens, but you don't, restrict yourself to looking for stuff like that, because you will be waiting a long time usually, unless you are a particularly charmed individual. But if you consider the small blessings and you let them expand in your consciousness, where that becomes your blessing, your baseline understanding of who you are in this universe, that you are this blessed individual sitting in the quiet hum of bees and birds singing in the trees around you and other sounds, even the airplane crossing overhead. Think about what a blessing that is compared to having to endure weeks or months at sea. You're where you need to go in under a day, even the farthest point, usually. Sometimes there's a little layover and we all grouch about that. But even so, I think we both connected with what a huge blessing it is to be able to just plant yourself on an airplane and then be across the ocean by morning. I mean, that is so huge. Such a blessing that we live in this time that's possible.
Yeah. I think I brought that up one or two times when it was an uncomfortable flight.
Yeah, it was an uncomfortable flight, but you have to remember what you're doing, and that gets you through. If you can put it into context, it took
7 or 8 hours versus months or whatever it took them to get across.
Our great-grandparents, coming across that ocean in a ship months on end in very uncomfortable conditions for them. But they did it, and we're here because they did it. Our life is what it is because they were willing to take that.
Imagine if they could have seen in the future and their descendants whining about 8 hours. Oh,
I know. I'm so embarrassed because
having somebody bring you a drink and all.
Yes, they bring me a drink and a nice
stop
meal.
whining, you idiots. You don't know what the hell we went through.
I know. See, that's it. We should be embarrassed. But no, because it's all part of it. But it is up to each of us to find that gold, underneath the pile of muck. It's there. It's absolutely there. Work your way through. Figure out what you've learned from the bad stuff that you've had to deal with. Be ready for the next time you deal with something bad. That lesson, those lessons, those tricks that you learn along the way, you can apply those going forward. And it's really a good thing. It allows you to be a help to other people because you've learned something. And that's life, Nobody's life is perfect. Nobody has everything that they want. Even the richest of the rich, they're all still squabbling around, trying to get more for themselves. It's never enough. And when you see that, it should make you feel quite satisfied with what you have. If you know you're going to have a meal tonight and you got a warm bed to sleep in tonight, and you have every expectation that tomorrow's going to be a safe day for you, that's a lot. That's a lot. And there are people on this globe that do not have those assurances today.
Sadly, most, I think.
Oh, and it seems to be getting worse when we look. And so our part in helping that is to not contribute to the problem, to be thankful. And I know it sounds maybe trite, and I'm not going to pretend that I always feel that way. There's certain triggers that just set me right off, and I, like everybody else, have to work my way through it. I have to pinch myself and remind myself of exactly this advice because it doesn't come natural to human beings. It is discipline. It takes discipline. It takes being able to rein yourself in, to zip your lip a lot of the time. I have the hardest time with that. I really do. Just not venting when things are not going the way I want them to. And, the more you do it, the better you get at it. But it doesn't mean it's foolproof or automatic. It's decisions, it's choices.
And there'll be a couple of backward steps here and there that you got to deal with, but keep going anyway.
And you usually do make things worse for yourself by doing it, by allowing yourself to, explode or whatever. You can have a mini explosion for a second or two, and it just kind of gets all of that, wild energy out. It's like one time I was taking a dog that I had. It was a border collie, and he was particularly energetic and not very well suited to city life. And I took him to a dog trainer. And the dog trainer said to me, he said, if there is a way for you to be able to open the door and send that dog out into the yard and let him run for a few minutes before you try to rein him in and put the leash on him, if you can just get that burst of energy out of him, he said, sometimes it only takes a couple of minutes. Let him run. Chase him if you have to, because he loves it. And then put the lead on him. He said, if you can expend that energy, it's going to go lots better for you, and the dog's going to be a lot happier. And I think that was good life advice. I mean, that was a very, very difficult dog. He was cute and sweet and loved me to bits. But boy, oh boy, everything that moved, that animal felt he had to chase. But that was his nature. And so the advice that the dog trainer gave me was good advice. Blow off that steam for a second. Give yourself a shout or two, but then get busy. Rein it in. Count your blessings. Understand this is just a blip that you've got to make your way through. You will make your way through it because you've chosen to make your way through it. And when you do it with some style and some class and steadiness and fortitude and fidelity and all of those pretty little words that we, find in the dictionary, if you can apply all of that to you dealing with whatever you're facing, it becomes an example to other people. They begin to be able to see that they're not the only ones with problems, that everybody has their deal that they have to work through. And then you work through it. And the next thing you know, you're on the other side of it, having gained some wisdom, some tricks of the trade, hopefully, and you're on to the next thing. And it won't be long, I assure you, as a living being, that something else will crop up that you've got to put your diligence to. But you will. You have to. What's the alternative? You have to.
That's right. And exercise your resilience muscles, so to speak.
Yeah. So practice your meditation where you just get quiet. Practice taking apart whatever you've dealt with to figure out, what have I learned from that? What didn't work? What did I do wrong? What did I say that I shouldn't have said that only had the effect of inflaming the whole problem? So those two things working in tandem, plus diligence, discipline, fidelity, all of that stuff. Apply those same things and you got something. And now I'm going to get quiet and we'll add a minute or two of natural sound for you to listen to so you'll know what we're talking about. And with that, I say, see you tomorrow.
Okay, bye.